The desert was silent except for the sound of the wind dragging fine sand across the dunes. The sun was lowering toward the horizon, painting the sky with a glow of red and gold. Omar stood on a ridge, wiping the sweat from his brow as he looked at the dig site below. His team had been working here for months, guided only by an old map found in a forgotten archive. Most people had dismissed the map as fake, but Omar had felt something in his bones. He was sure that something important was hidden here now. As the workers brushed away the last layers of sand, a strange structure was coming into view. At first it looked like the entrance to another buried temple, but soon the shape of a great stone gate appeared. Unlike the usual tomb entrances carved with familiar hieroglyphs, this one shimmered faintly. Symbols covered the surface, some looking like Egyptian signs, while others looked nothing like anything Omar had ever studied. The carvings curved and twisted in ways that seemed alive. When the last of the sand fell away, a faint glow ran across the symbols as though the gate itself was breathing. Lena, one of the younger archaeologists, whispered to Omar, "This is not normal stone. Do you see the way it shines?" Omar nodded slowly, his eyes wide. He had studied dozens of tombs, but never had he seen one that pulsed with light. His heart raced as he walked closer, his boots sinking into the sand. He placed his hand gently on the gate. A shiver ran through him. The stone was warm, almost alive. Behind him, the local workers began murmuring nervously. An older man named Farid shook his head and said, "You should not open this. The elders say this desert hides the Pharaoh's curse. Some doors must remain closed." Omar turned to him. "This is not a curse. This is history. This is knowledge waiting to be found." His voice was firm, but inside he felt the same unease as the workers. Still, curiosity burned brighter than fear. The team set up lamps and equipment as the sky darkened. The desert night came quickly, cold and endless, but the gate glowed on its own, casting soft light around the camp. The more they studied it, the stranger it became. The stone had no cracks, no sign of age. It looked untouched by time, as if it had been placed there yesterday. Lena crouched by the markings, tracing them with her eyes. "Some of these are like stars. Look here, Orion's belt, and this looks like a map of the Nile. But what about these others? They are not Egyptian at all. They almost look mechanical." Omar leaned closer. He agreed. It was as if two different worlds had carved their story into the same gate. He felt as if he was standing at the edge of something not just ancient, but something far beyond human understanding. Later, when the camp grew quiet, Omar could not sleep. He sat by the gate alone, staring at the glowing lines. His mind kept returning to Farid's words about a curse. But Omar did not believe in curses. He believed in truths buried under sand, waiting for the brave to uncover them. As the moon rose, a sudden gust of wind rushed across the dunes, howling like a warning. Omar braced himself, shielding his eyes from flying sand. When the wind passed, he noticed something new. The gate had shifted. A seam had appeared down the middle, a narrow line of light shining through. His breath caught in his throat. The gate was opening. He called for Lena and the others. They rushed to his side, gasping as they saw the line of light. With a low rumble, the massive stone doors began to part. A cold air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of earth long sealed away. The sand trembled beneath their feet. Beyond the opening was not darkness, but a corridor glowing with pale blue crystals set into the walls. The air inside seemed heavy yet alive, as though it had been waiting for them. The corridors stretched far into the earth, sloping downward. Lena whispered, "This is no tomb. This is something else." Omar felt his heart pounding. Every instinct told him to be careful, but his curiosity pulled him forward. "We go in," he said firmly. "This is what we came here for." The team gathered their lights and equipment, stepping into the passage. The walls were smooth, carved with scenes of pharaohs kneeling before towering figures that were not human. The figures were tall, their heads crowned with shapes like stars, their hands holding objects that glowed faintly even now. Omar touched the wall as they walked, running his fingers over the carvings. "This is a story," he said softly. "A story the world has never seen." Deeper they went, the glow of the crystals lighting their path. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of their footsteps. Each step felt like they were walking, not just into the past, but into another world. At last, the passage widened into a vast chamber. The ceiling arched high above, supported by pillars covered in more strange carvings. At the center stood a stone altar, and on it lay an object that glowed faintly with golden light. The team froze, staring in awe. The object looked like a crown, but unlike any crown from history. Its edges shimmered, shifting like liquid, yet holding solid form. Omar stepped forward slowly, his eyes fixed on the crown. He felt as though the air itself was pressing on him, testing him. Something about this place was not just old. It was alive, and it was watching them. The chamber seemed to hum softly, a low sound just at the edge of hearing. Omar's chest tightened. He realized now that Farid might have been right in one way. This was not just history. This was a gate to something greater. And by stepping inside, they had awakened it. The air inside the chamber was heavy, almost as if the walls themselves were alive and breathing. Omar stood near the glowing crown on the stone altar, but he did not dare touch it. The golden light from the strange object spread across the room, making the carvings on the walls seem to move. Every figure carved into the stone seemed to lean forward, their eyes glowing faintly in the crystal light. Lena whispered, her voice trembling, "Do you see that? The walls are moving." At first, Omar thought it was only a trick of his tired eyes, but then the entire chamber gave a deep shudder, like the ground was shifting beneath them. Dust fell from the high ceiling, and the glow of the crystals on the walls grew brighter. The sound was low and rumbling, but it carried through the stone like thunder. Farid, who had reluctantly followed them inside, fell to his knees. "I warned you. This place is not meant for us. The Pharaoh sealed it for a reason." Omar ignored his fear. He had spent his whole life searching for answers hidden under sand and stone. His heart told him that this labyrinth held truths greater than any treasure. Still, even he felt unease twisting in his chest. The team moved back toward the passage, but when they reached it, they froze in shock. The corridor was no longer straight. The walls had shifted into sharp angles, and the floor itself had rearranged into uneven blocks. Where once there had been a clear path, now there was a maze. The corridor. "It has changed," Lena whispered, pressing her hand to the stone. "It is alive," Omar frowned. "Not alive, but built to change. Someone designed this place to move and trap intruders." They pressed forward carefully. The glowing crystals lit their way, but the path was unpredictable. Every few steps, the ground shifted, stone slabs sliding into new positions. Once, a wall closed behind them with a heavy slam, sealing off the chamber they had left. The team moved in silence, their breathing echoing against the stone. Then suddenly, with no warning, the floor beneath them tilted sharply. Lena cried out as she slid forward, but Omar grabbed her arm, pulling her back just before a pit opened ahead. Inside the pit, sharp blades of light spun like a trap waiting for prey. "This place tests us," Omar said, his voice steady though his hands trembled. "It is no simple tomb. It is a labyrinth made to protect something or keep something locked inside." They continued with greater care. At one point, they entered a hall where the walls were covered in symbols. Unlike the simple carvings outside, these were complex, filled with spirals and star-like shapes. At the far end of the hall stood a large door with no handle, only a circular pattern carved into it. "What now?" Lena asked, her voice small. Omar studied the symbols. He traced the lines with his finger, noticing how they connected like a puzzle. Slowly, he began pressing the stones in a sequence that matched the path of the stars carved on the wall. The door responded with a low hum. The symbols glowed, and the heavy stone slab slid aside, revealing another passage. "It knows we are." "Here," Omar said. "It wants us to prove ourselves." As they moved deeper, they entered a chamber where tall statues stood in a circle. Each statue had the body of a man, but the head of something unearthly. Shapes like stars, birds, and beasts never seen on Earth. The statues held weapons glowing with faint light. Suddenly, the floor beneath the statues cracked, and beams of light shot across the chamber like arrows. The team ducked, narrowly avoiding the deadly beams. One worker was grazed on the arm, and the wound burned as if fire had touched him. "It is defending itself." Lena cried. "No," Omar said firmly. "It is testing us." He noticed that the beams were not random. They followed a pattern, striking in rhythm like music. Watching carefully, he timed their steps and guided the team across the chamber, moving only when the beams were low. His calm voice cut through their fear. "Now, stop." Now, at last, they reached the far side unharmed. The statues dimmed, and the beams vanished. Omar felt sweat on his face, but also a strange sense of pride. They had not only survived, but solved another trial. Deeper still, they came to another wide hall. Here, the carvings told a story. Pharaohs were shown kneeling, but not before gods of Egypt. Instead, they bowed before towering beings with strange crowns and weapons of light. Omar stared in silence, his mind racing. "This is impossible," Lena whispered. "These are not myths. These are records. Whoever built this was not from this world." Omar placed his hand on the carvings. The stone was warm, pulsing faintly. Under his touch, his voice was quiet but steady. "The pharaohs made a pact. They built this labyrinth with help from others. And whatever is sealed inside, they feared it enough to build all this to hold it." The hall began to tremble again, louder this time. The walls shifted once more, closing behind them and opening ahead. The labyrinth was guiding them deeper. Omar's heart pounded. He realized now that they were not just exploring, they were being led, step by step, to something waiting below. They followed the path until they reached another chamber. At the center was a massive stone disc lying flat on the floor, covered in glowing lines. The air around it was colder, heavy with strange energy. Omar felt a pull in his chest, as if the disc itself was alive, and watching them. Lena spoke softly, almost in fear. "We should turn back. This is not meant for us." Omar shook his head. "It is meant for us. Do you not see? This labyrinth reacts to us, changes for us. It wants us here." The chamber rumbled again, and the disc began to spin slowly, glowing brighter with every turn. The sound of stone grinding filled the air, and a deep echo rose from the earth below. The labyrinth had awakened fully, and there was no turning back. The stone disc in the chamber spun with a deep grinding sound. The glow from its markings filled the walls, sending waves of light across the carvings. Omar and his team stood still, unsure whether to step back or move forward. The ground vibrated under their feet, and a cold wind swept through the chamber. Though there was no opening for air to enter, Lena clutched her bag tightly. "This is not natural," she whispered. "We should leave before it is too late." But before Omar could answer, the disc stopped spinning. The glow concentrated into a beam of golden light that rose from the floor to the ceiling. Within, light shapes began to form. At first, it was only mist. Then slowly, The mist shaped itself into a figure. It was a man, tall and robed like an ancient pharaoh. His crown was high, but unlike the crowns of history, it shimmered as if made of both stone and star. His eyes glowed with a faint blue fire. He looked down at them with calm authority. Farid fell to his knees at once. "The Pharaoh," he whispered in awe. "He has returned." The figure raised a hand, and though no voice came from his mouth, the chamber filled with sound. The words were not spoken, but seemed to form directly in their minds, heavy and echoing. "You who walked the labyrinth," the figure said, "you awaken the seal of my final work. Know that I am not a god. I was Pharaoh, chosen of the Nile, and I speak to you from beyond death, for this labyrinth is my voice." The team stared in silence. Omar's heart pounded as he listened. The figure continued. "In my time, we ruled, with stone and chisel. But there came a shadow from the stars. They were not gods, though my people thought them divine. They offered us power, tools beyond our knowing, in exchange for our obedience. I bent my knee, not for glory, but for survival. For with them came word of a beast that devours worlds. It had followed their ships through the dark, and it hungered for earth." The chambers seemed to grow colder as the Pharaoh's image spoke. The light from the crystals flickered like stars in the night sky. "I commanded the building of this labyrinth," the Pharaoh's voice went on. "Stone from our quarries, knowledge from the skyborn. Together we forged a prison for the beast, binding it deep within the sands. But prisons do not last forever. The beast is patient. It waits, and I knew one day, when the old ways were gone and my kingdom forgotten, others would come here. That is why I left these trials. For only those who can endure the tests of mind and courage are worthy to face what waits below." Omar felt his breath catch. The Pharaoh was not just telling them a story. He was preparing them for what was to come. The figure lifted his hand again, and the wall shifted. The carvings of pharaohs kneeling before strange beings began to glow. The alien figures seemed alive, their eyes bright with power. "The pharaohs?" Echo pointed to them. "These were not gods," he said. "They were wanderers from the stars. Some brought us wisdom. Others brought fear. They warned us of the beast, but they would not fight it. They left that burden to us. And now, if you have reached this place, the burden passes to you." Lena trembled. "Why us? We are not warriors. We are only seekers of knowledge." The Pharaoh's image turned toward her. His glowing eyes seemed to pierce through her. "It was never warriors who would save the world. Warriors can fight, but only seekers can endure. The beast is not held by swords or spears, but by knowledge and will. If you have the strength to reach the heart of the labyrinth, you may hold the seal. If you fail, the beast will rise again, and earth will fall as countless worlds have fallen before." The chamber fell silent. Only the hum of the stone disk remained. The figure began to fade, the glow of his crown dimming. His final words echoed inside their minds. "Remember this. The labyrinth does not test your body alone. It tests your soul. Only those who stand together will succeed. Alone, you will be devoured. Together, you may endure." Then he was gone. The beam of light collapsed, and the chamber darkened once more. For a long moment, no one moved. Farid still knelt, whispering prayers under his breath. Lena looked pale, her eyes wide with fear and wonder. Omar stood silent, staring at the empty space where the Pharaoh's echo had been. His thoughts raced. He finally spoke, his voice steady. "This is no longer an excavation. We are part of something far greater." The Pharaoh was not speaking to us by chance. He knew we would come. He prepared this place for us. "But Omar," Lena said, "what if we cannot do what he asks? What if we fail?" Omar looked at her. In his chest, fear battled with determination. "Then earth will fall, and I will not allow that." We have to go on. Whatever lies ahead, we face it together. The labyrinth answered his words with another deep rumble. The stone disc sank slowly into the floor, revealing a spiral staircase that led downward into darkness. A cold wind rose from below, carrying with it the sound of something vast stirring in the depths. Lena shivered. It is waiting for us. Omar tightened the strap on his bag and took the first step down. Then we will meet it, and we will not fail. The team followed, their footsteps echoing down the stone staircase. The crystals dimmed above, and the darkness below grew thicker, filled with the weight of something ancient. The echo of the Pharaoh lingered in their minds, guiding them forward. The labyrinth had spoken, and there was no turning back. The spiral staircase seemed endless, winding deep into the earth. Each step echoed against the stone, mixing with the low hum of the labyrinth that surrounded them. The air grew colder the further they descended, and a damp smell of old stone and something darker filled their lungs. Omar led the way, his lantern casting faint light on the steps. Lena walked behind him, her eyes darting to the shadows as though something unseen followed them. At last, the stairs ended in a wide hallway. The walls here were different. They were not smooth stone like before, but covered in strange dark patterns that looked like cracks. When Omar touched them, he pulled his hand back in surprise. The marks were not cracks at all, but carvings of eyes and arms, stretching across the surface in twisting shapes. Each eye seemed to stare at them as they walked. This feels wrong, Lena whispered. Her voice trembled, and her hands shook as she held her lantern. These markings, they are not human. They are not the Pharaoh's. Omar nodded slowly. This must be the beast. These carvings are warnings. As they moved further into the hall, the air grew heavy. A sound began to rise, faint at first, like a whisper carried by the wind. The whispers seemed to come from the carvings themselves. Each time they passed another wall, the whispers grew louder, echoing inside their minds. Farid pressed his hands to his ears. Do you hear it? The voices. They are calling to us. Lena clutched her head, her face pale. They are showing me things. I see fire, endless fire. I see a creature with many arms tearing the sky apart. It is waiting for us. Omar grabbed her shoulders firmly. Do not let it in. They are only visions. They cannot harm you unless you let them. But even as he spoke, he felt the same pressure building in his own mind. Dark shapes flickered at the edge of his thoughts, a hunger unlike anything human. They pressed on. The corridor ended in another chamber, larger than the rest. The walls here curved like ribs, as if they were inside the body of some great beast. At the center of the floor lay a massive symbol carved into the stone, glowing faintly red. It looked like a circle of eyes and claws, twisting into one another. The moment they stepped inside, the whispers rose into a roar. The red glow pulsed, beating like a heart. The ground trembled, and a low growl filled the chamber. The workers who had followed them fell back in fear, their eyes wide. This is the mark of the beast, Omar said, his voice heavy. The Pharaoh sealed it here, and it still lives. Suddenly, the symbol flared bright. From its edges rose shapes made of shadow, tall and twisted. Their bodies were smoke, but their eyes glowed red. The shadows circled them, moving without sound. Stay together, Omar commanded, holding his lantern high. Do not break the circle. The shadows moved closer, their arms stretching long and sharp. One lunged forward, striking at Lena. She gasped and raised her lantern. To their shock, the light burned through the shadow, making it recoil with a hiss. The light, Omar shouted. Use the light. The team raised their lanterns, their flames glowing bright. The shadows shrieked as the light drove them back. They twisted and writhed, but the glow pushed them against the walls. The whispers screamed louder, but slowly the shadows melted away, vanishing into the cracks of the chamber. The red glow of the symbol dimmed, but it did not fade completely. It pulsed slowly, like the heartbeat of something sleeping. Omar stepped closer, staring at it. He could feel heat rising from the stone, and beneath it, a presence pressed against his mind. He saw flashes of the beast. It was vast, larger than mountains, its arms stretching like endless branches, its eyes burning like stars. He saw it devour whole cities, its many mouths swallowing light and life. His knees weakened, and for a moment he almost fell. But he forced himself to look away. "We cannot touch it," Omar said firmly. "This mark is the seal. If it breaks, the beast will rise again." Lena's face was pale, but the seal is weakening. "Look at the cracks. Time is breaking it." Apart, the ground trembled again, as if agreeing with her words. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the glowing symbol flickered weakly. Omar clenched his fists. The Pharaoh's words echoed in his mind. "If you fail, the beast will rise again." He turned to the others. "We were brought here for a reason. The Labyrinth chose us. We have to finish what the Pharaoh began. We must strengthen the seal." Farid shook his head. "We are only people. We cannot fight this thing." Omar's eyes burned with determination. "We are not soldiers, but we are human. The Pharaoh said it himself. This is not about war. It is about will. If we endure, if we solve the trials, we can hold it back. We must try." The whispers quieted for a moment, as though the beast itself was listening. Omar felt its hunger press against his mind again, but he pushed it aside. He would not bow to fear. As they left the chamber, the red glow pulsed one last time, and a voice, deep and rumbling, filled the corridor. It was not words, but a single feeling, heavy and sharp. Hunger. Lena clutched Omar's arm. "It knows us now. It is waiting for us." Double quotes. Omar looked ahead into the dark path. "Then let it wait. We will not break." They stepped forward, lanterns raised high, while the whispers followed them through the twisting halls. The labyrinth was not just testing them now. It was warning them that the true trial lay ahead. The corridors twisted deeper into the earth, carrying Omar and his team away from the red-marked chamber. The whispers had grown faint, but their echo still lingered in everyone's mind. Each step felt heavier now, not only from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. The Pharaoh's warning was clear. The labyrinth was not a tomb, but a lock, and the lock was breaking. Lena walked close to Omar, her lantern trembling in her hand. "Omar," she whispered, "what if the seal cannot be fixed? What if it is already too late?" Omar looked at her. His face was tired, but his eyes held steady resolve. "Then we still try. If we fail, at least we will know we did not run from our duty." Their path narrowed into a long hall lined with strange designs. Unlike the earlier carvings of pharaohs and beasts, these markings were geometric spirals, angles, and patterns like those seen in mathematics. The crystals in the ceiling glowed brighter here. Casting a cold white light. At the end of the hall stood another great stone door. Unlike the doors before, this one had no carvings of gods or kings. Instead, it bore a smooth surface with symbols, arranged in neat circles. Some looked like stars, others like equations. Omar stepped forward, running his hand across the symbols. "This is not a trap," he said. "This is a puzzle." The others gathered around, studying the door. Lena's eyes widened. "These are numbers. Look, 3, 6, 9. And here, this is a sequence. They used math." One of the workers frowned. "But why math? Why not more carvings or words?" Omar answered, "Because the Pharaoh knew. Language changes, words are lost, but numbers do not die. Whoever comes here, no matter the age, will understand numbers. This is a test for the mind." They began working together. Omar traced the equations with his fingers, while Lena noted patterns between the stars carved on the surface. The symbols glowed faintly whenever they pressed the correct sequence, but dimmed when they pressed the wrong one. Slowly, piece by piece, the door began to respond. The workers grew restless. "We are no scholars," one muttered. "We cannot solve this." Omar turned to them. "You do not need to be scholars. You know patterns. You know rhythm, weight, balance. All of that is part of this. We solve it together." Encouraged, the group began offering ideas. One worker noticed how the circles on the door matched the phases of the moon. Another recognized that the lines of symbols resembled constellations he had seen as a child. Piece by piece, human memory and thought came together. At last, Omar pressed the final symbol. A deep hum filled the chamber, and the great stone door slid open, revealing a vast room beyond. They stepped inside and froze in wonder. The chamber was filled with machines. Not simple tools, but towering structures of metal and crystal, still glowing faintly after thousands of years. Some looked like giant wheels, others like instruments with strings of light stretching across them. The room thrummed softly, as though alive. Lena whispered, "This is not Egyptian. This is alien." Omar nodded. The Pharaoh said they gave him tools. These must be their machines. They walked carefully among the machines. Some were broken, covered in dust and cracks. Others still moved faintly, spinning or glowing as if waiting to be used. The group gathered around a large device, shaped like a circle standing upright, its surface rippling like water. As they studied it, a low tone filled the room. Lines of light appeared on the walls, forming shapes. At first the lines looked random, but soon they shifted into patterns, puzzles of music and rhythm. Notes echoed in the air, rising and falling. "It is asking us to play," Omar said. Lena stepped closer, her hands trembling. "Play? But how?" The machines around them began to respond. Strings of light hummed, crystal panels glowed, and tones rang out when touched. It was an instrument, waiting for someone to use it. Omar touched one of the glowing strings. A deep note echoed. He smiled faintly. "It is sound. It is music." The others hesitated, but soon they joined him. Together they pressed, struck, and plucked the glowing parts of the machines. At first it was chaos notes clashing against each other. But then Lena noticed a pattern in the tones that matched the star symbols they had seen before. Slowly, she guided them, pointing to which notes to strike. The chamber filled with sound, a harmony of human voices and alien design. As they played, the lines of light on the walls shifted, forming a constellation. The machines glowed brighter, and the entire chamber seemed to awaken. The door behind them closed with a heavy slam. For a moment, fear gripped the team. But then the constellation on the wall shone bright, and the floor shifted. The ground moved upward, forming a bridge across the room. The machines had accepted them. They had solved the puzzle, not with force, but with creativity. Omar stood tall, his heart swelling with pride. "Do you see? This is why we are here." The Pharaoh's trials were not made for strength alone. They were made for thought, for music, for numbers, for the human mind. Lena smiled faintly despite her fear. He wanted to know if we could build, not just destroy. They crossed the bridge, reaching another archway at the far side of the chamber. The machines behind them dimmed, their glow fading as though going back to sleep. But Omar knew they had proven themselves. The archway led into a downward passage. The air grew colder again, and the light of the crystals dimmed. The ground beneath their feet rumbled faintly, as though something deep below stirred with impatience. Farid whispered, "The beast feels us. It knows we are close." Omar clenched his jaw. "Then let it know. We will finish this. The Pharaoh gave us these trials so we could prove what we are, and we have passed them. We are human. We are more than what the beast believes. With that, he stepped into the passage, lantern raised high. The others followed, their hearts heavy with fear but burning with hope. The labyrinth had tested their strength of mind, and they had prevailed. But Omar knew the hardest trial was yet to come. The downward passage was long and narrow, the air colder with every step. Omar felt as if the walls themselves were pressing in on him, carrying the weight of centuries. His lantern flickered, and for a moment he thought he saw shapes moving in the shadows, but when he turned, the corridor was empty. Behind him, Lena and the others walked in silence. Their faces were pale, their eyes filled with both fear and determination. At last, the passage opened into a vast chamber unlike any they had seen before. The ceiling rose so high it vanished into darkness. The walls curved in a perfect circle, glowing faintly with shifting symbols. At the very center of the chamber stood a colossal black crystal, pulsing with a dull light, as though it had a heart of its own. Around it, strange machines of stone and metal formed a cage, their surfaces covered in cracks and glowing lines. The moment they entered, the ground trembled. The crystal flared, and a sound filled the chamber, a deep, endless growl that shook the air. The team froze. The presence they had felt all along was no longer hidden. It was here, in front of them. Lena whispered, her voice almost breaking. "That is it. The beast, it is inside." Omar stepped closer, his eyes locked on the crystal. He felt its hunger pressing against his mind, heavier than before. Visions flashed before him, worlds burning, skies torn apart, creatures running before being swallowed by endless arms and eyes. He staggered but forced himself to keep walking. "This is what the Pharaoh sealed," Omar said quietly. "And this is what we must face." The crystal pulsed again, and a voice filled their thoughts. It was not words, but feelings, hunger, rage, freedom. The ground cracked beneath their feet as the cage of machines shuddered. The seal was weakening. Suddenly, the symbols on the walls lit up, and the chamber itself began to shift. Platforms rose from the floor, forming paths across the space. Beams of light shot between the machines, forming barriers that blocked their way. The labyrinth had not ended. It had saved its greatest test for this final place. Omar studied the shifting paths. "It is another puzzle," he said. "The Pharaoh's last trial. If we solve it, we may strengthen the seal." They moved carefully across the platforms. At one point, a path collapsed behind them, forcing them to leap to another. At another, beams of light cut across their path like blades. Omar timed the beams, guiding the group safely past. Sweat poured down his face, but his voice remained steady. Lena pointed to the walls. "The symbols. They are showing us the pattern." She traced the glowing shapes with her eyes. "We must follow the stars. The path matches the constellations we saw before." Working together, they crossed the chamber step by step. Each time they chose the right path, the crystal dimmed slightly, its growl weakening. Each time they hesitated, the glow flared, and the ground shook. At last, they reached the base of the crystal. The machines around it were broken in places, their glowing lines fading. Omar placed his hand on one of them. The surface was cold and rough, but beneath it, he felt a pulse. "The Pharaoh's cage is failing," he said. "We must restore it." But how? The machines were alien, their purpose far beyond human knowledge. For a moment, despair filled the group. Then Lena spoke softly. "The Pharaoh said it was not about strength. It was about will. These machines respond to thought, to creativity. We must use what we know." Omar looked at her and nodded. "We use everything we have." They began working together. One worker noticed that parts of the machine hummed when touched with metal tools. Another found that striking the cracked surface with rhythm made the lines glow brighter. Lena sketched patterns from the constellations, placing them against the glowing panels. Omar used math he remembered from old studies, pressing symbols in sequences that matched the numbers carved into the door before. Slowly, the machines began to respond. The cracks glowed, the cage grew brighter, and the crystal pulsed weaker. The growl turned into a low hiss of anger. The beast was fighting, but the labyrinth was giving them power to push back. Suddenly, the crystal flared bright, and a wave of darkness rushed out. The lanterns flickered. Shadows filled the chamber, forming twisted shapes like before. They lunged at the group, striking with claws of smoke. "Hold them back," Omar shouted. "Do not stop working." Lena and two others kept pressing the symbols while the rest raised their lanterns. The light burned the shadows, holding them at bay. Omar fought beside them, swinging his lantern, forcing the darkness back. His arms ached, but he refused to stop. "Faster!" he shouted. "We are close." The cage glowed brighter, beams of light shooting upward and forming a net around the crystal. The shadows shrieked and dissolved. The crystal cracked, but instead of breaking open, it sealed tighter, its light pulled inward. The growl turned into a roar of frustration that shook the chamber. Then, silence. The machines glowed steady, their cracks sealed. The cage stood whole again, and the crystal dimmed to a faint glow. The beast inside stirred, but its power was locked away once more. Omar fell to his knees, breathing hard. Sweat covered his face, but his eyes shone with triumph. "We did it," he whispered. "The seal holds again." The chamber grew calm. The walls dimmed and the platforms sank back into the floor. The labyrinth had accepted their success. Lena placed a hand on Omar's shoulder. "You were right. This was not about strength. It was about what makes us human." Omar looked at the sealed crystal. "The Pharaoh gave us his burden. Now it is ours. We are the keepers of this prison." Farid's voice shook as he asked, "But for how long?" Omar stood slowly, his lantern still glowing. "For as long as it takes. As long as there are humans to stand, this beast will not escape." The chamber fell silent again. The seal was safe, for now. But deep within the crystal, the beast's many eyes still burned, waiting, watching. Omar turned to his team. "The labyrinth is not over. There is one last step we must take." They nodded, their fear replaced by quiet strength. Together, they prepared to face the final choice that awaited them. The chamber was silent now, the echo of the beast's roar fading into the stone. The black crystal pulsed faintly at the center, trapped once more inside its glowing cage. Omar stood before it, his chest heaving, his hands shaking from the weight of what they had done. For a moment, he allowed himself to breathe. They had not only survived, they had restored the seal. But the labyrinth was not finished. The floor trembled softly, not with rage this time, but with purpose. The walls shifted, and a narrow stairway appeared on the far side of the chamber, glowing with golden light. It led upward into the dark. Omar turned to his team. "The labyrinth is guiding us again. There is one more step." Lena's face was pale, but her eyes held steady courage. "The Pharaoh said we would have to prove our souls. This must be the last test." They climbed the glowing stairway, their lanterns casting long shadows behind them. The air grew warmer as they ascended, as if the weight of the beast below was fading. At the top of the stairs, they entered a smaller chamber, round and simple, lit by a single object resting on a stone pedestal. It was the crown. The same crown Omar had glimpsed in the first chamber, now glowing brighter than ever. It shimmered like liquid gold, its edges shifting with light. Unlike any earthly crown, it looked alive, as though it was not just worn but bonded to the one who claimed it. The team stopped at the threshold, staring at it in silence. The chamber seemed to hum softly, waiting for their choice. Farid's voice shook, This is what the Pharaoh left behind: his crown, his burden. Omar stepped forward, his heart pounding. He could feel the power radiating from the crown, pressing against his chest like a heartbeat. This was no simple symbol. It was a key, a command. Whoever wore it would not only guard the labyrinth, but become its master. Lena whispered, "If you take it, you will never be free again. You will be tied to this place. Are you ready for that?" Omar's eyes stayed fixed on the crown. His mind raced with memories: the Pharaoh's warning, the beast's hunger, the countless traps and puzzles that had tested them. All of it had led here. Humanity was being asked to take the burden, not for a day or a year, but for as long as the world endured. He turned to his team. "This crown is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us. But one must wear it. One must bind with the labyrinth. If I take it, I will not leave this place. I will stay as its keeper." The silence was heavy. No one argued, for they all knew Omar was the one chosen by the labyrinth. From the beginning, he had led them, guided them, and faced every trial with unshaken will. Lena's eyes glistened, but she gave a small nod. "Then take it, Omar. Take it for all of us." Omar stepped forward to the pedestal. His hand trembled. As he reached out, the crown glowed brighter, responding to his touch. When his fingers closed around it, the chamber filled with golden light, blinding and warm. He lifted it slowly, then placed it upon his head. The moment the crown touched him, the labyrinth itself stirred. The walls glowed with new life. The air pulsed with energy, and the sound of 1,000 voices whispered at once. But these were not the whispers of the beast. These were voices of guardians long gone, voices of pharaohs and builders, echoing their strength into him. Omar felt the weight of the labyrinth settle upon his shoulders. Every corridor, every chamber, every stone was now part of him. He felt the beast below, still thrashing against its cage, but now he also felt the locks holding firm. He was the seal. He was the keeper. His knees bent under the weight, but he stood tall. The crown did not crush him, it strengthened him. His fear turned into steady resolve. The golden light faded, and the chamber grew calm once more. The crown rested firmly upon his head, glowing faintly like a star. Omar turned back to his team. His eyes burned with quiet fire, but his voice was steady. "It is done. The Pharaoh's burden is now ours. The beast will not rise as long as I stand." The team bowed their heads, not in worship, but in respect. They knew what he had given up. He would not leave this place. He would remain its guardian for the rest of his life. Farid whispered, "You are the new Pharaoh." Omar shook his head. "No, I am not Pharaoh. I am only a man. But I am human, and that is enough." The labyrinth rumbled softly, as if agreeing. The crown had chosen, and the labyrinth was whole again. The team left the chamber, climbing back toward the desert. As they stepped out into the dawn light, the sand stretched endless before them. To the world above, nothing had changed. The desert still lay silent, the wind still carried dust, and the sun still burned. But deep below, humanity had taken a new role. Omar remained behind, standing in the glowing chamber. The labyrinth pulsed with his heartbeat, and the beast stirred faintly within its prison. He placed his hand on the stone wall and whispered, not to his team, not even to himself, but to the ages, "As long as there are humans, you will not escape." So the Pharaoh's final labyrinth found its new keeper. The War of Ages had not ended, but humanity had proven worthy to stand in the line of guardians. The desert would cover the entrance once more, hiding the truth from the world. But beneath the sands, the crown burned with human strength, and the beast waited in vain. For now, Earth was safe.